Hey guys, Poro here, back again with the series that I said I wasn't going to do, which is weekly global power rankings for the League of Legends pro scene. I said last time that I wasn't going to keep doing it because I didn't think I'd have time for it, and I didn't really think it was worth it to do weekly power rankings, but there were a couple of people who said that they really enjoyed the analysis and having a channel that will allow them to get caught up on what happened during the week, because not everybody can watch all of the different regions like I can, so it's nice for the people with less time to be able to check in and see what happened. This week I'll be doing the same thing as last week, but I've also included the PCS as they started, and there will be one PCS team, so you can look forward to that. And with that out of the way, let's get started with number 25. Alright, in 25th, as promised, is the one PCS team, Impunity Esports. They are 3-0 in the PCS, but just being 3-0 in a minor region isn't enough to actually get you onto this list. The reason why is because of who they beat to get here. So they beat Duish Team, which was expected, but then they beat Deep Cross Gaming and Hellpigs. So for reference, Hellpigs had a really impressive showing in their first game, enough to make me think that they were going to be one of the top PCS teams, and then Impunity beat them. And then the day after, they beat Deep Cross Gaming when they were both undefeated 2-0, and Deep Cross Gaming does have some notable names on it, for example, Hanabi. And so if you can beat Hanabi in the top lane, then that means, in my opinion, that you are a good top laner. And so I have respect for Driver, and I have respect for this team going 3-0 against two other teams that I thought would be at the top of PCS. So they have earned their way onto 25th, although if they lose any games, to be honest, they're probably getting knocked off. But for now, PCS does have a slot as number 25. I will say in the future that if the VCS kicks off, that Gigabyte Marines and Saigon Buffalo did change their org, so all of the entire roster moved to a different org. I can't remember what the org name is off the top of my head, but those two teams are going to be on the outside looking into the top 25, so if either of those teams seem to really dominate in the VCS, they'll probably slip their way onto this list as well. But for now, they haven't started, so the only thing I can really put here is the PCS, and they only take up that one slot. Moving into number 24, we have SK from the LEC. I moved them down a couple of spots because they did drop a game to Astralis. However, they did finish 6-3, very impressive, and they do have wins against both Vitality and G2, which is important, and their losses aren't that bad. They only lost to BDS and MAD. For reference, I'm only really displaying the wins and losses that matter for their overall records. As you can see, they're 6-3, but I'm only displaying 2 of their wins and 3 of their losses, mainly because the other wins are either ones that I showed last week, or they're just wins that I don't really think impact the entire scene. Like, for example, SK beat XL, but I wasn't going to put that on there because that's not really an important win that determined their ranking. They were expected to win that. Whereas on the other hand, I do put on that they lost to Astralis because it is important to note that they had one bad loss, which is mainly why they got dragged down, because the Astralis loss is pretty difficult. In number 23 from the LCS, also moving down in the rankings, is Cloud9. Not really much changed for Cloud9, just that they lost to the other undefeated team, FlyQuest, meaning that FlyQuest moves up and Cloud9 moves down. In 22nd, moving up a couple of slots, is BDS. BDS had an interesting week because they only went 1-2, but they do still have an impressive record overall, and I really like the way that they play their games. I feel like they have a strong identity coming into the best of 3 section, and I feel like they have what it takes to be a top 4 team in the LEC, so I have more faith in them. Of their losses, their only bad loss is to XL, every other loss is fine, and they've picked up some good wins against Mad Lions and SK, so I view them as a strong, stable team that is top half. In 21st, getting a massive bump down is KT. Admittedly, when I placed them 13th on my first list, it was more of a biased placement, but now they've played some more games, and there is more sample size to go off of, and having a loss to Kwandong Freaks is really not a good look for your roster. However, they did manage to pick up a win against Fred at Brion, which of course, as you may have noticed, knocked Fred at Brion out of the top 25, but KT hangs on by a thread for now. In 20th, actually staying in the same spot as they were on the last list, is FlyQuest, and the only notable thing that happened this week was that they did pick up that win against Cloud9. However, there was a lot of movement from the 1 to 19 section, which means that FlyQuest does not move up at all. In 19th, Hanwha Life Esports. So they started off pretty poorly, 1-3, but they did have a little bit of a bounce back. They're now 3-3, including the big one, a win against T1. I originally had Hanwha Life actually getting booted off of my top 25, but after defeating T1, they've earned their way back onto the list. In 18th, getting knocked down a bunch of slots, is TT. They have a 1-2 record, and while I still really like this roster, they did lose to both LNG and WE, so not the best look for them. However, they were the only team to be able to defeat IG, which is what's keeping them here in the top 25. In 17th, one spot above TT is WE, mainly because WE defeated TT. They are 2-2, and their losses aren't that bad either, losing to Edward Gaming and OMG, so definitely decent losses and a good win. In 16th, getting bumped down a little bit, is G2. They finished 6-3, same record as SK. However, their losses were all pretty okay losses. They lost to SK, Vitality, and Mad Lions, none of which are poor losses. They were able to beat all of the teams that they were supposed to beat who are on the bottom half of the roster, picking up important wins like BDS and Koi. So I have them as 16th, pretty stable European roster, not really beating any of the higher ranked teams, but securely beating all of the lower ranked ones. In 15th from the LPL is RNG. They are 1-3, so really not a good look for this roster. They had to start with Bunny instead of Ming, and apparently there was some drama between Ming and the coach, is what I'm assuming, because what happened was that Ming was refusing to re-sign with the team, and then the day that the coach stepped down, Ming all of a sudden re-signed, so I'm going to assume that those two things are linked. But anyway, RNG only got to play one game with Ming on their roster, and it was a loss, but even though they're 1-3, their one win against OMG is a strong win, and their 3 losses are not bad losses, losing to IG, LNG, and EDG, all teams that are really strong teams. So RNG still gets the pass for now. If they lose a couple of more, then they're just going to sink down real fast in the rankings, but for now I still have a little bit of faith. In 14th, Mad Lions. They have been doing really well, only losing 2 games to BDS and Vitality, which are not bad losses, and beating everybody else. So this team has been looking really strong. Today they played a match against G2, and it was a very convincing, strong victory, which allows me to confidently put them above G2 for now. So Mad Lions gets 14th. In 13th from the LCK is Live Sandbox. The only thing that has happened this week is that they lost to Gen G. However, before I was on the fence about whether they were actually a good team or not, as they hadn't really beaten any of these super impressive teams, but in their showing against Gen G, they made it a 1-2 really competitive slugfest, so Live Sandbox, despite only losing a match this week, has moved up a number of spots as I finally see them as a strong competitive team and I no longer doubt their skill. In 12th from the LEC is Vitality. However, they didn't have the cleanest week ever. There was a game where Bo dropped like 11 deaths, and they also did lose to Koi, so they do not get to retain their spot from last week. However, they are still 7-2. They are still topping the LEC. Strong wins versus Mad Lions, G2, and BDS. So they are comfortably at the top of the West for now, but have been losing a little bit too many games to be to put them in the top 10 globally. In 11th from the LPL, OMG, moving on up a couple of spots. They beat WE this week. That's really all I have for you. There's not enough to go off of. They're only 2-1. So we'll see how they are, where they're going. They did lose to RNG, which for now I don't think is a bad loss. It could become a bad loss in the future if RNG just turns out to be really bad, but for now OMG still gets cut some slack here. In 10th from the LPL, IG. This is another scenario to Live Sandbox where I was having my doubts about the team at first, but IG has definitely proven that they have what it takes to be a top team. They unseated EDG recently, and only lost to Thundertalk Gaming, which I also feel like is a strong team, so IG has my respect as one of the stronger teams in the LPL, and they are 10th overall. Coming in 9th and retaining their same spot is EDG. They did lose to IG this week, but then IG went and lost to Thundertalk, so IG ends up going under EDG by the end of the week anyway, which means that EDG gets to keep its spot. In 8th from the LPL is LNG, and they are 3-0. They have good wins over Thundertalk and RNG. However, Thundertalk and RNG are looking to be middle of the pack, slightly upper level teams, so LNG really has not defeated any of the big names yet, so I can't put them higher than 8th, but they are undefeated, and if they keep this win streak, they'll obviously be rising. In 7th, Top Esports. Nothing has happened since this week has gone on. However, there are other teams that have had some impressive performances, as you'll see later, meaning that Top Esports gets booted down by default. In 6th from the LCK, also getting booted down, is Damwon Kia, with losses to both T1 and Gen G. The main thing that's booting them down is that loss to Gen G, but Damwon still looks like a strong team. In 5th, retaining the same spot as last week, is Gen G from the LCK. They have a win over Damwon Kia and a loss over T1, so pretty standard. They have solidified themselves as second in the LCK. In fourth from the LPL, Weibo Gaming. This is the big news, as you can see that they lost to BLG. BLG was another one of those teams where they looked strong, but I wasn't quite sure where to put them. BLG had a competitive series against JDG, and I wasn't sure if it was because BLG was good or JDG was not as good as I had thought. But after beating Weibo Gaming, I can be sure that BLG is the real deal. So Weibo Gaming and of course Top Esports gets knocked down as a result. In third, moving up 4 spots, is BLG. With their win over Weibo and their loss to JDG, means that as of right now, they are the second strongest team in the LPL despite only having a 2-1 record. Getting booted off from first, T1 now sits in second due to their loss to Hanwha Life. Whether this loss is really indicative of their total power level or not is up for grabs because T1 did do a little bit of interesting drafting during that series, but a loss is a loss. And JDG did not lose, meaning T1 has to get booted down to second, and JDG 3-0 gets the first spot, still with that good win over BLG. And that will do it for my rankings this week. And of course, like last time, here is a list of all of my rankings with highlighted colors for each region. I probably actually will be doing another one of these next week, so I will see you then.